Thank you.
Look at that photo of you.
Oh, they got a decent one. Nice.
I think when I saw your show, I go, well, this is the most intimidating writer I've ever encountered. And then I met you, and you get the Knight Rider jacket and the and the stubble, and you're even more intimidating.
What?
It's really unfair.
Come on.
You.
Are you drunk?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm a little sleep deprived from making my dumb animation for my stupid presentation.
That was terrific, though, right? Did any of you guys see that? Yeah.
And I noticed that there's more of you here for this one. There are so many things that I think people want to know about you when they see this show. It seems like the logical place to start is biographical. Let's just, so you come out of the womb
Yeah.
in...
I did, yeah, I grew up in South Louisiana. A lot of the same territories that we show on the show.
And you talked a little about, yesterday when we chatted, the imagery in the show that people are so taken by.
Yeah.
In your opinion, it's not so much like an artistic projection as just...
Yeah, I mean, of course there is artistic projection, but I had the feeling sometimes that people were disturbed by the simple visual reality of South Louisiana. You know, we didn't build that stuff. We were just photographing what was there, and it was the places and the things that I remembered, and that have stuck with me throughout my formative years. You know, the almost sinister element to the proliferation of vegetation, the amount of layering and shadows and the flatness and kind of desolation and these visually bucolic, Edenic scenes that, you know, if you just turn your head, there's a giant refinery, like pouring silver water, you know.
But down here, there's a naked lady with antlers.
Yeah, and down here, there's a naked lady with antlers. And, you know, well, I got this thing. I was like, one thing we didn't film because reality has far outstripped fiction in its weirdness and implausibility. There was a strip club across a narrow road, directly across a narrow road from a little girls' dance academy. And there was a sign that had the silhouette of a woman dancing on a pole, and then a sign that had a silhouette of a little girl in a tutu. And I was like, we can't shoot that. That's life being too ham-handed for fiction.
They'll think they'll think that you that you made that up, and they'll tell you to tone it down.
Yeah.
So your childhood there, you speaking of formative. So I mean, can you give us like what was the darkest formative moment you can recollect?
There is no chance I would share that.
Well, how about one that...
I haven't shared that with my wife. No, you know, it was just, it was a very rural place. It was very religious, very superstitious, very judgmental. But as I grew older, I began to see these things as products of fear and a kind of powerlessness. You know, and my family was what it was. I don't really like to talk about them. I mean, I think that it's not fair to do that. I think, though, with most writers, and maybe yourself too, you begin with some ultimate dissatisfaction with the reality you're presented with.
Right.
And you posit an alternative in your mind and begin to people it with what you see, trying to get at what you see and experience at its truest level. You know, sort of let's cut through the obfuscation.
I just kept saying, everyone's a robot until my dad hit me. But you, like, what, can you conjure a memory?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, this isn't so terrible or anything, but it scared the hell out of me. You know, I remember a prayer group my parents were members of, and like sort of peeking around the hallway at all these adults holding hands with their eyes closed and telling each other the visions they were having. You know, like, oh, I see Michael with his sword of fire and you know, and his glorious golden wings. And
What religion is this?
this was Catholicism, particularly, you know, South Louisiana variety. But even as a young kid, I was probably too conscious of the world and adult hypocrisies. And I remember, you know, being like, I was 5 or 6, and realizing at that time that, oh, these people can't tell the difference between thinking a thought and hearing a voice. And that scaring the hell out of me.
So you ended up, by the time you're in higher education, because one of the more fascinating things about you is that you come from the world of academia, which doesn't seem to go hand in hand with TV, but you came at just the right time.
Well, I was at, you know, I always point out, like, you know, Milch started in academia.
Yeah, it shows.
But but I wasn't too cut out for that world, and I'd never meant to enter it. I just wanted to be a writer, and I got married, and, you know, had people to support or try to support, and without my books making money to, you know, enough money to really live off of, it was sort of the only thing I was trained for, and I had always wanted, like so many people, to do something in television and film, but there were so many class and economic and geographic boundaries, and I had always heard the same thing everybody else heard: you have to know people, you have to be born into it. It's all nepotism and stuff like that, and you know, there's definitely that there, but when my novel got published, it was optioned for a little tiny amount of money, but that was the first time I ever got to talk to an agent from the business. And so I could say, while I have you on the phone, you know, how do I break into television? Because I'm really interested in doing that. I'm you know, interested in creating shows and staffing. At the time, too, I was desperate to get out of academia. I mean, really desperate.
Can you talk a little bit about the frustrations of that world? Like,
yeah, I mean,
because you were succeeding at it. You were.
Yeah, I was doing great. I mean, on paper, I was just miserable. And I have to really believe in what I do, and I don't enjoy bureaucracy, and there's as much a proliferation of needless bureaucracy in academia as the U.S. government or something. And I began to see it as this kind of pyramid scheme where we were taking money from each new generation, and they're going to get back less and less and less and less. And I'm not even sure what they're getting back anymore, because I believe in education is supposed to be rigorous. And rigor has been largely removed from the higher educational system in America. Now it's all about, it's like a service industry. You know, make the children happy and make sure they're giving you good rate your professor quotas, and you know, make them, tell them what they want to hear, and then move them along. And I just didn't see much worthwhile there. Like, I liked the idea of teaching, and I had some great success with, you know, I only did that for 4 years. It wasn't like I had time to be broken by the system. But even then it gets problematic, you know, because like we were talking about, now this with our wonderfully fascistic culture of outrage and these things called, like, you know, trigger phrases and stuff in higher education. So like, can't even really teach literature now because everybody is so sensitive. And to me, I was always under the impression that, like life, education should meet you with ideas and words that make you uncomfortable and force you to confront your reasoning and your critical thinking, and to extend your perception of other people's humanity.
Me too. Yeah, we spoke about this at length yesterday. I mean, it's yeah. I'm actually surprised to hear that that's actually going on in the academic.
Well, the stories
sphere.
I read, the stories I read now are like much worse. I was like, whoa, I got out just in time. you
Yeah.
know. I'd be
Um,
in jail or something.
So, your wife, you got married relatively young, and then there was this point that you described where you were still on that academic path. You were conscious of these boundaries that were around you. You were living what you described as a pretty edgy existence.
Well, that was before I got married. I mean,
Oh yeah, you described that, and then you cooled it when you got married. Then you described something that surprised me, but also like sounds like again you're a real writer. Like your wife got pregnant, and when she was in her third trimester, that's when you suddenly.
yeah. Well, I'd written a book of short stories that nobody read, and I spent 2 years writing a novel that I pulled from publication because it was going to be published, and I didn't. It wasn't good. It was shit. And so she's in her third trimester, and just in about 2 months, I wrote my first novel, my only novel to date, Galveston, and I would write it like between 4:30 in the morning and 8:30 when I would go teach. And I would just like wake up, slug one of those terrible energy drink
Yeah.
shots, and then I'd go sit at the typewriter. And but I kind of related that to my daughter was the first time I felt stakes in the world, because previously I'd been like, I don't care if I'll die unsung. I don't, why, like, who cares,
And you thought you were going to, and then you got published, and then Galveston got optioned?
Yeah, it got optioned.
Was that before or after?
It was after it got published, and it wasn't optioned for much money or anything. But like I said, that let me talk.
That was your
to an
entree
agent.
to talking to somebody in the industry, and you said, "How do I get into TV?"
Yep.
So obviously, then they get you in a room with somebody from HBO.
Well, no. Yeah, I can. Yeah, they brought me up to HBO, and they just thought I was really charming and handed me a check. And no, I asked them, well, what do you have to do? And it seems like people were asking you this kind of same question. And they said, well, have you ever written scripts? And I said, no. And they said, well, you need to write scripts. And I said, yeah, but specifically, what do you need? And they said, well, if you can write us a great spec of an existing show and a great original show, we can break you in. We can start, getting you meetings. And then up to the, it is going to depend, though, on the quality of your work. And then it's going to depend on when you meet people, if they can tell you're a serious person who knows what they're talking about, or if, you're just some overconfident blowhard or something. And so then I spent the month of July in 2010, and I wrote 6 television scripts. I wrote a spec for an existing show, 3 episodes of an original show, a second original show pilot, and then a third original show pilot. And the third one was True Detective, and I always held on to that, and I never let anybody develop it or purchase it or, make it into something with me just listed as creator. I wouldn't let it go until I had learned enough about the industry that I felt like I yes, I can do this. I know what needs to be done, and I can do it. But those 6 scripts got me a lot of meetings. And so I flew out, met a bunch of people the first time, like every studio, bunch of showrunners and stuff. And it all ended with me getting about 5, maybe 6 job offers. And I got a blind pilot deal with HBO, which was not for True Detective. It was for another show I had created. And so we developed that for a year, and it didn't end up being filmed. But I think that let them get to know me somewhat and see what kind of person I was and how I worked within the system, and which is somewhat subversively.
You said you speak very highly of the people at HBO.
You bet, absolutely.
Maybe name their names and tell us why. What makes these people at HBO?
I'm just trying to think if that helps me.
You think that it'll go to their heads and they'll abuse it?
No, but Mike Lombardo, the president, Richard Pepler, the CEO, David Levine, my executive, Michael Ellenberg. These guys were all very supportive of me. Now, that's not to say I didn't have to fight for things
Right.
and argue for things, but nothing's a mandate, you know, which is much different than network
Right.
from all the horror stories I've heard, you know. It's almost like, well, look, I can explain to you in detail why we're doing everything we're doing. And it's not some abstract theory, it's because it results in a concrete effect on the viewer. And at the same time, it propels what I think is authentic about the piece to me. And so what I found was that, you know, as long as you can have those discussions, and it's the same thing with actors, you know, like they'll listen to you as long as you make it clear that, you know, I'm not full of shit.
Yeah.
This is, and I never walk into anything without a script. I mean, I don't pitch without a script, and for a couple reasons. It gives people less opportunity to keep you in development. You know, like you walk in with what you have, but I also think that the script is my best pitch. Like, I can't sell something. I'm not a natural salesman, but I'm a pretty passionate guy. So if I like something, I'll be passionate about it, and I can maybe convey that. But in order to like it enough to get passionate about it, I have to create it first.
So, okay, so you...
And then I took a job at The Killing, too.
Right, you took a staff job at The Killing and then left that.
And that was like, that year of that was like my TV school, you know?
So, you respect these people at HBO. You also talk about wanting to avoid mitigation and development. Like so where are you falling on the spectrum? I've talked to so many writers. It seems like, and I don't know if this is because we're all jaded pricks or if it's because the industry is absurd. It seems like when we talk about good executives, we're largely hearing stories about people staying out of the way.
You bet.
People not doing necessarily a bunch of helpful things, but people actually just not doing a bunch of unhelpful things.
Yeah. Well, I was like, I mean, you know, we sold the show with Matthew and Woody attached and with the first 2 scripts written. So it was sold kind of in a way that was like, this is the show we're making. You know, and because of these actors' scripts, we got to get to, schedules, we have to get to making it. We can't spend time developing it and making it something else. This is what it is. Even though you have to continually make that argument. It is not some other thing. But yeah, you bet. You know, it was kind of like, I mean, this is what I tell my producers is, because I hooked up originally, you know, with producers that I didn't work that well with, and the ones I don't work well with, I find they constantly want to put themselves between me and other people, and I don't like that, because I don't want people speaking for me. I can speak for myself. I'm fine at it.
Right.
You know, and it's also, you know, it's often there are great producers, and there are producers who are arsonists who want to start fires so they make it look like they have a purpose by putting out the fire they started. And then there are ones who, for whatever reason, want to be the conduit of communication between the creative and the executive. And I've just never, you know, like the best producers that I work with, and I love the guys I work with. Steve Golan, Scott Stevens, my line producer and exec producer, he's phenomenal. They know and they're comfortable with letting Nic speak for himself. You know, so I prefer as direct a relationship with everybody at every level as I can.
Did anybody ever, maybe you don't want to say, but I mean, there had to be threshold guardians for you to come in with that certainty. It didn't just switch off all the valves. I mean, this is a business that absolutely thrives on hazing newbies and maintaining the importance of seniority. I mean, for the reasons you described, because there's a lot of people that...
Well, that's one of the reasons I left the writer's room I was in, was, I mean, like you were saying, like, and it's true, like, a writer's room is can be a great place to come up in, and if you take a raw talent as staff, you know, and you maximize their potential and help them maximize their potential. I think by the time I got to Hollywood, for better or worse, I was already developed into the type of writer I'm going to be. That's not to say that evolution doesn't continue and you don't keep pushing yourself and trying to get better, but I mean, I had my own theories and understandings of what I felt good writing was and what I felt good TV was, and you know, and nobody ever tried to haze me. I don't think that would have worked out very well. But you know, like part of it was creating like creating the show and saying like I'm not going anywhere, and you know if we're gonna make it, we're gonna make it this way.
So this is now we've gotten to the juicy part because we're talking about the creation of this show that everyone, I mean, in an almost historically feeling way, people were enamored with this thing that was out of nowhere and on TV, was the work of one man, and was just it was this big bright burst, and the texture and all these things. I mean, I think as a writer, one of the first questions I have when I watch the work of someone that intimidates me creatively is, do you think that you're good? What does your bad stuff look like? How long does it take you? I mean, and let's investigate those questions from at the point where you're sitting down to write the first episode of True Detective. You referred earlier to pulling one of your pieces of work from publication because it was shitty. Okay, what makes your work shitty when it's shitty?
Well, about that novel, I don't think it was really a novel. It was more like I was trying to be some sort of intellectual teacher's pet. It was, I mean, it was really discursive. It was overly philosophical and metaphorical, and the character moments which is the only place anything ever comes alive is in character. They were there, but there was maybe like a short story's worth of them. You know, otherwise it was this very meandering plot about post-Katrina New Orleans and stuff, and like partly when it didn't do any of the things I like storytelling to do. You know, it kind of had this precious, overly melodic language, and you know, I know people might say like, yeah, you still have that.
It was overwrought in your opinion. You felt like you were.
It was overwrought with it. It was a mountain out of a molehill, is what I would say. And when I do bad script writing, and they're all bad the first time. I mean, I bust through a bad first draft so that I can begin to take apart what exactly I'm meant to be getting at. I mean, I need the stuff I put down and the characters I create to teach me about what I'm creating. You know, like I have a very symbiotic relationship with my creations, sort of, and I'm both the mule and the guy in the cart whipping the mule. When I write a bad script, I'll tell you, like what
do you promise?
Yeah. What I think it is, what it looks like to me, and it's people running around delivering information. You know, and you've probably felt that before too.
Too much mule whipping and not enough mule.
Yeah, something like that, or right.
It's like
I'm doing the typing, and you know, like there's obviously a plot at work here, but there's no life. Like life is the thing that eludes you. And it's the thing that if you have it in something you write, people will always sit up and take notice. At comedy, too, like, you know, when you're writing comedy, whether it's like, wait a minute, is this just people standing around telling jokes, or are there actual human beings engaged in action, right? And the humor arises out of that.
Yeah.
And so in my line, it would be like, wait a minute, is this just people walking around trading information, or is it's not yet people living with each other and against each other.
It's like the difference between assembling a great roller coaster, but there's no cart.
Right.
There's no buckle. There's nothing. It's not usable.
Yeah, like this is kind of an interesting story if it had anything like human life in it. You know, it's like that.
Or like presenting someone with a chess game, just an outline of it, as opposed to watching chess players sweat and trip. You're talking about something that I've heard other writers talk about, something that I've talked about. you're going back and forth between two roles while you do this first pass already. You know that structural things need to be done. A cause effect, the story unfolds, but you're already in that first draft, uncontrollably or voluntarily submerging yourself into the skin of the people talking and feeling weird things.
You know, it probably started as voluntarily, and now it's I don't know any other way to do it. I mean, yeah, it's almost I mean, it's almost like method to me. You know, I'm there talking out loud, making faces, walking around.
Do you cry?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I have cried, totally. When I realized what happened to one of the main characters in the novel I was, in my first novel, Galveston, I mean, I hadn't quite planned on it. I just realized, like, oh yeah, this happens. And then when it happened and I was writing it, I was really upset. And I was mad at myself that I'd done that, because she'd become real enough to me in my imagination. Yeah, and I get like very emotionally wiped. Writing those 8 was a really like eye of the needle type thing. I mean, I was writing them in a converted garage in Van Nuys, and I'll show you a picture after this, but all the walls were covered in Post-its, little Post-its that were full of tiny writing, and like it looked like a beautiful mind or something. And I would write for long stretches. Like there were periods where I would write for 20 hours. And then I'd pass out for 12 hours.
What kind of things are on those Post-its? You're
all kinds, like character lines, an insight into a character. Like I wasn't even working with like beats the way you would in a regular writer's room like that. I had these rough outlines, but so that I knew exactly where the story would go. But the character moments, the life, the thing, the only thing that ever makes you want to sit down and watch and not look away. Those are all things I was trying to assemble as this two-man, and I say two-man in the sense of it having 2 firm points of view. And television usually doesn't have a point of view. It usually just shows you whatever it wants you to see, whenever it wants you to see it. Which with mysteries I never quite understand, because I'm like, well, wait, if we've got omniscient point of view, just solve the mystery already. Show me the killer.
Is your brain okay? No. Is your brain split between your characters, or is it? Are you? Are they? You talked about them like having their own life. These Post-it notes. You realize things about these characters, and then I think that there are writers who are trying to say something with the whole thing. I mean. The True Detective has these themes of manhood and demons, and it's got 2. I mean, obviously, 2 very different ways to be a fucked up guy.
Yeah.
Are they? I mean, this is probably the silly, the most Good Morning America question, but I think it's one people want to know. Are both those guys you? Is one of them more you? Are either of them you? Are they the result of dividing you?
Well, you know, they both. Cole was much closer to under my skin than Hart, but they both represented fears and roads I could have potentially taken. Not like I could have been a homicide cop in South Louisiana. You know, no, just like they're different forms of illusions that I could have been susceptible to, both the quite convincing pessimism of Cole and the look, as long as I'm keeping a roof over everybody's head and doing my job, I can live my life, and people don't need to know what I do. You know, and Cole was closer to me both in the things we didn't tolerate and portions of our disposition, but also in his integrity. I think, like, you know, I've left jobs before where I didn't have the next thing lined up and stuff just because I was like, nope, can't, like, won't look myself in the mirror and do that. It's you know, I don't have the door open that much for new people, But when I have a friend, I'm intensely loyal, and you know, like we tend to stick around forever. You know, like I never lost one yet. But no, like neither one. I wouldn't say like they're both me. Maggie's me. You know, like it's all part. It's all facets of you that grow into whole other creatures, right? Like there's no character. If you're worth the damn as a writer, there's no character whose point of view you can't imagine and understand empathetically, right? But no, neither of those men are me. You know, I like people more than Cole likes people, and I'm more honest than Marty. And so.
The character that you define as being the most under your skin tells a woman with all pragmatism that she might want to consider suicide at one point.
Well, he was actually being a friend to her then. A case I read about that was
So
very
that
much
wasn't
like
just
that.
that wasn't like sadism. That was actually
No,
he was doing.
no. I mean, like not at all. And again, yeah. I mean, I'll comment on stuff like this because no, a woman who committed a crime like that. She had committed infanticide 3 times and it was put off to SIDS. She was beaten to death in prison shortly after arriving because, like Cole says, prison people who hurt children, they get the worst in prison because every scumbag and psychopath, like that's where everybody draws the line as far as honor, you know, and like, oh, you killed a kid, you did something to a kid, well we can all do whatever we want to you because you're the scum that's beneath us.
Right.
And so in a way, Cole was telling her, and that, you know, like the newspapers, the media, they were gonna they're gonna put you through hell before you actually enter hell, and you know then even worse things are gonna happen, and then Cole probably also felt like you murdered 3 children.
Yeah.
If I was you, I'd consider suicide.
When I work in comedy, but there are characters like Rick from Rick and Morty,
You bet.
Sarah Silverman from the Sarah Silverman program, characters that I really enjoy writing for are these experiments in soullessness. What if I wasn't penned in?
Yeah, but see, Rick has soul. Like my brother even pointed out, speaking about the similarities between Rick and Rust. Like Rick even stopped a serial killer at the end of this season and admitted he loved Morty, and cried. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, people. It's a delicate balance because I think a lot of the reason why we like organized crime movies, the reason why we like werewolf movies. We have a need, it seems, to indulge. I don't want to call it a fantasy because the word fantasy has all these connotations of like, oh, we wish we could do that. But really what fantasy is like, oh my God, I would never do that. And it feels like one of the scariest things about this world you were describing at the top of the conversation, where we're getting increasingly abraded by things that are supposed to affect us, is that this very real need that society has to be indulged in their darkness. If it's cut off, it's going to be like the equivalent of you know, antiperspirant as opposed to deodorant shutting off your sweat glands. Are we going to explode?
Yeah, I don't know, and I mean, and I don't believe for a second that you know, like darkness or something like that influences dark act. Like insane people who have mental illness and are prone to violence are going to find inspiration in whatever they want, and the rest of the world watches everything we watch, and they don't seem to have these mass shootings and shit like that. But you know, like I think Rick is a sociopath. You know, I always thought Rust was very soulful, especially in the sense that I always got the sense from Rust in his pessimism, however convincingly articulated, that he was a man trying to convince himself, you know, or else he could put a lid on it.
Right.
Right? You know, and even when he's in that interrogation room and he's like, me, fuck
Right.
you. Like, who's he complaining to? You know, I always took Rust as his complaint is essentially Job's complaint,
Right.
which is that if you believe in a personal God who has a destiny for everyone, well, then you're just a character in his story. And Job's complaint is, I am a character in this story, and I do not like this story, and I do not like the limitations of my character.
Yeah, the most evil characters or the darkest characters in mythology are crying out for, they want somebody prove me wrong about this.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Yeah.
So where do you stand in relation to the cosmos?
Well, that's probably, that should be tonight's topic over drinks. You know, I mean, I don't think we have time to go into a cosmology or anything. But I can tell you, I find both sides of the spectrum don't hold much truth for me as far as belief or non-belief, because honesty is what matters to me, and honesty in the unknowability of your situation as a human being. You know, I mean, I believe in science. I don't have to believe in science. You don't need to believe in science. That's the great thing about it. But we live as human beings within a cloud of unknowing. You know, like, yes, it is explained to us how we got here from a condensation of super dense matter exploding and expanding outward, and how the iron in dead stars has ended up being the iron in our blood. But still, consciousness, culture, art, literature, mathematics, like, that all does seem to speak towards perhaps there's more to this than just running around and eating and screwing, and, you know, but maybe there's not. But what I've never claimed to do is know what I don't know. You know, yeah, I got theories about what's going on in the universe. But
One more question about this esoteric area before we. I think people want to know about the production, you know, life on the set, the casting, and things like that. But I regardless of, so when you are creating, do you have a relation? Do you credit? Do you think, like, is it an ego-based thing? Do you think that you're, you know, making something, or do you feel like, you know?
what do you mean? Do I feel that I'm forging within the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race?
I think that's what I'm asking.
Well, it's nice to think you might be, but most of the time, no. You know, most of the time I'm just trying to make it right by my own standards, and the content of what I've created helps me determine what the standards are, you know?
You described your flawed self as this overwrought person that made this shitty thing that you were ashamed of. That guy was trying too hard a little bit, not to put too fine a point on it.
The same guy is right here. You know, he's learned his craft better. He knows who he is more. He's not seeking validation. And I mean, like, pulling that from publication really freed me, because I was like, never again. Never again will I create towards some kind of validation. Never again.
Is there a way to describe your job as a writer? I mean, in a way that they go, well, Nic said this. Nic said I'm supposed to be doing this. Otherwise, I'm doing it wrong.
What do you mean, like? Well,
I mean,
you know, I think the big tip would be to learn your craft as well as you possibly can. To learn what you do well and what moves you. When you read your stuff, your own stuff, and be honest with how bad it is. And look at it and find the places where it does come alive, even if just for a sec, even if it's just a line, because that right there is the key to unlocking what is going to make you successful. It's like, where did it come alive? Oh God, that's the part that just popped out. I did all this overwrought shit and trying to get everybody in the room together and with their separate problems, and then this one character just made a joke, and that's the first time anything pops off the page as I entered briefly a fictional dream, right? Because when I first got here, I get a lot of questions from, like, PAs and stuff on set, you know, like, well, man, how did you get a staffing job, you know, when you've never been here before? And you know, like I'm a writer, and I was like, well, if you want to be a writer, stop being a personal assistant. Like you can't learn to be a writer if you're spending 15 hours a day taking care of somebody. You need to go live somewhere where you have a really low overhead and dedicate yourself for years to learning how to do this instead of hoping, well, if I service the right executive the right amount of years, maybe they'll let me, you know, be like get into a writer's room or something like that. Like the best thing you can walk in with is good work. And the way you get good work is by learning your craft and confronting who you are as a creator. You know, what do you do well? What is your voice? Like, yes, you admire these people and you enjoy these people, but you can't be them. And so don't try to be them. The world already has them.
Yeah.
Who are you?
So you write these scripts. You had written all of them already before you started production of the first one, or you
Yeah.
still hadn't?
No.
So you go into the casting process. I mean, that's one of the most notable things about the show is these two.
Well, we cast before we pitched, and you know, like I hired Carrie before we hired the cast, and I had very specific ideas. We got pitched a lot of actors, and actors who, back at the time, February 2012, were probably hotter than you know, like younger and hotter. And I was like, no, we need men. Like, and by men I mean men not from the latest generation, and no, you know, like, but have defeat and failure behind them as well as success, and you know, know something about responsibility and things like that. And I saw the Lincoln Lawyer, and that was like a reminder, like, oh yeah, that guy, like, you know, what's he doing? He's great.
Did you see Surfer Dude? What was it called?
Well, that's when I knew they would really pair up well. No, and Woody was always on our lists because you know he had done Rampart and Game Change, and those are two great performances, great different performances. But we had heard like Woody will never do TV again. Woody doesn't like playing cops. He won't play cops and da da da. But so Matthew leapt on the material, and he was fearless about like no qualms, TV, HBO, whatever. He just really connected with it. And then he suggested, you know, I don't know if you guys are in discussions about the other guy, but I thought Woody Harrelson might be great. And we were like, you know, have you ever considered him? And we were like, yeah, maybe you could help with that. And so he helped us get Woody. And then we took it out, pitched it with those two actors attached. I pitched it. You know, you're the guy that does all the talking in the pitch. Everybody else is just there to sit there and be like, yeah, we're on the team. And then we prepped from September to January. Had all the scripts done by September of 2012. Went into production January 2013, and finished June 29th, 2013.
How'd those guys?
They just set up a sign that said 10 minutes.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Was that 10 more minutes for us or for the whole thing?
For the whole thing, we should probably. You think I would imagine we got probably a lot of questions from the audience. I mean, I could ask a million more about what, you know. I want to know if those guys got along and what. I want to know all kinds of things, but I also don't want these guys cheated out of their burning questions. So, do we have an efficient way of doing this? Does anybody raise their hand if they have? I think these shot up first.
My question is, when you have a character that is very close to you, like Rust, and you're approaching second season, and you don't have this character in the next iteration, is it intimidating that you have to now go to a place with new characters that you don't have that connection to?
Well, no, I do have that connection to them. I mean, I find that connection with all my characters, or else they're not interesting enough for me to keep going with, right? So the characters I have in season 2, who aren't like Rust, I feel a great passion and affinity and empathy for, you know? Yeah, you know, it's sort of like, well, I never had Rust to work with till I created him. And my job as a writer is to like keep creating these characters, you know? And that's not to say people will like these characters as much as they like Rust or anything, but I feel they are as interesting and as complicated as Rust.
It all comes down to Jeremy Renner and Brad Pitt's performances in the.
Nobody has talked to Jeremy Renner or Brad Pitt. There is not a single rumor you have read online that has any basis in fact whatsoever.
It's Key and Peele.
Wouldn't that be great? But they're kind of doing that on Fargo, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
They're like two FBI agents or something.
Can you talk
okay.
a little bit about Carey and his involvement in your writing and creative process before you actually go into production?
Yeah, he didn't really have an involvement. Yeah, Carey doesn't get to, you know, critique my scripts or say, let's do this or that. That wasn't what he was hired for. I mean, I take feedback from everybody, you know, and if I respect you enough to work with you, I definitely want to hear your feedback, but there was no collaboration on the material. And then on set, if we were doing anything that involved dialogue, I was right there the whole time. I'm there with the actors. I'm there in rehearsal. So the only time I was ever not on set during the shooting was if we're capturing a, you know, establishing shot or something like that. But the scripts were written in a vacuum. And then, you know, I went through a notes process with HBO, my executives, which is an inescapable process. And that I like the notes process actually if you're working with good people, because it can at least show you that something you were trying to do obviously didn't hit the way you wanted it to hit. It's not like they're going to say, you do this.
Right.
It's just like, if they didn't get something I was going for, I need to go back to that, because I feel like the audience should have gotten that.
Yeah.
Right?
Question for you. So, True Detective, everyone spoke about how it was so different and revolutionary in terms of murder mystery. What do you think, as the creator, you brought to the table as at being completely different? And, you know, just do you think it was just that you were the sole creator and you didn't really have other people to contribute, or like?
Yeah,
I just want to hear your
I
vision
don't
on
know.
that.
Like, I still don't understand what was so different. You know, I really don't. Like, two cops riding around in a car and they don't quite get along. You ever seen that before? You know, there's a serial killer somewhere out there. Has anybody done that? No, I don't know how to answer that question, honestly, other than I created it, you know? Like, I guess what I brought to the table was the table. And, and then everybody else was able to take possession of it, you know, and elevate the material with their performances and the incredible cinematography and all the phenomenal set dressing and T-Bone's amazing score and everything, you know, like, it was, yeah, I guess, maybe.
You got a hand back there, but not to tell anybody their business. I
So
nailed this interview.
You did.
Walking, yeah. So it seems to me that that the difference with your shows and many other drama series in the United States, which are really highly successful too, is that you follow the model like they have it in Denmark, where the writers are really creating the show, and the whole focus is on them and not on just the plot, and then it's given to directors and a certain look, and off we go. Is this maybe the reason it's so successful?
You know, I don't know. I think in American television, really in pay cable and something like HBO, you know, the writer it's his medium, and they consider you to be the person in charge, and you're the final arbiter. I think having the actual storyteller in charge of the storytelling makes sense. Whereas in film, thanks. you know, in film, it's like we're going to tell a story, but let's go ahead and push the storyteller out. And in television, it's exactly the opposite. And a lot of the guys I admired and who made me want to watch television, like Dennis Potter, you know, he was always a one-man show in the sense that, you know, he had a director and actors and everything, but you knew when, like, you were watching a Dennis Potter show. Like, there were no other shows like a Dennis Potter show, and nobody did the thing that got to the places he got. And even when I watch somebody like David Milch or something, you know, I think his name is on one script for Deadwood, the pilot, and I have it on pretty good authority that there isn't a word spoken in Deadwood that David Milch didn't write, you know? So however it's credited, that to me seems very much like an auteur product. And I just want to say, if you are from Denmark, we have been enjoying so much Danish TV recently. We just binge watched Clune, so kudos.
I almost felt compelled to interject. There's two schools of thought about that. What you're talking about with Milch, he's one of the writers that feels the way I do. There wasn't a single word of Community that I didn't, unless somebody nailed it. I shouldn't say that. I'm no David Milch, but I got my greasy fingers all over everything. But I think that the writers whose names go on the scripts, that's their reward for putting up with their job. They walk away with credit on one script. Is it the one that they did the most work on, or is it the one that they got the most jokes in? It might actually be totally unrelated. There's other showrunners who just go, look, I did the majority of work on this, and they put their name on every episode that they did a lot of work on. And there's very polarized opinions about it.
Well, yeah, and I am of conflicting opinions about that because it's a different business model than anything I know. I'm used to prose writing where you wrote it, it's your name on it. And then I became uncomfortable with my name being on something that I didn't write. Like, that makes me uncomfortable. And I don't know where I'd land with a writer's room, so I just don't have one. And it's
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. I was just wondering about this limited run that you have, and if you were always thinking about this as a 6-part series to start out with, or if that was something with HBO.
No, I had it as 8 parts. It was going to be 8 episodes, and it was broken as being 8 episodes, and then the episodes were specifically structurally broken to achieve certain effects. Yeah, it was, you know, partially it was because I was writing them all, and 8 seemed like a good number. It would also, you know, make sure that our shooting time wasn't going to be beyond what would allow us access to cinematic talent, which I think now we would have more leeway with. But I liked the symmetry of it. 4 duologies, kind of, out of 8.
Hi. Testing, yes. Hi. I just wanted to know how you looked to the second. I mean, I know you're already there, but how you faced the second season, given the success of the first season, knowing everyone's waiting, knowing a lot of people have expectations. I mean, how do you get around that and just sit down and be fresh with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. The way I initially handled it was poorly. And now I'm doing better. I tossed the first things I wrote because I realized I was in some way writing towards expectation and criticism. And like I said, you know, I got to relearn the lesson, but it's okay to relearn these lessons as long as you don't let anybody see the bad stuff.
You tossed stuff that was early work on season 2?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whole characters and stuff. Because as I reminded myself, what got us here, wherever here is, you know, in success or failure, is me writing in a vacuum and pursuing the vision I wanted, you know, for better or worse. Whether somebody hates that vision or doesn't, that's what got us here, and that's how I have to create. I create in a vacuum, and I'm not in the service industry. You know, I'm not asking the internet, well, how would you like your TV? Can I get you anything with it? Oh, you don't like that TV? Let me get you some new TV. And And you know, they'll, as happens to us all, at some point, you know, I'll be kicked out. Somebody will take me behind the woodshed and explain you don't get to do this anymore. But in the meantime, in the interim, before I'm ousted, I'm not going to spend this much time and effort pursuing other people's expectations. You know, writing is too difficult for that. It's really, really hard. And every time I've done it right, or every time I've done it in a way that people have really responded to, it cost me. I mean, it cost me, you know, emotionally and physically. And I'm not going through that as though I'm a political campaigner, you know? And here I am stumping, telling you what you know, well, what do you want to hear me say? Okay, I'll say it. No new taxes, you know? I mean, I was going to say I'm not an elected official, but in a way, you are, because nobody watches your show, you don't get the job. So I write in a vacuum. I keep a wall between myself and the noise. I don't indulge in social media. I save my relationships for personal relationships between people I love and admire, and everything else just kind of falls away, you know?
That's exactly how I do it. I'm famous for it, for my isolation from the public. I think that's all the time we have. That was a great last question. Best writer ever, best moderator ever. Thanks for coming out in such numbers. Thanks for coming
Thank
to
you.
the anthem.
Thanks very much.
See you in the funny papers.
Thank you.